The billionaire thought nothing would surprise him anymore in this life. He hired a single mother to take care of his disabled twins. But when he saw her with them, something broke the coldness in his lonely heart. What he witnessed that day changed everything forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. The Blackwood mansion stood imposingly against the afternoon sky, its mirrored windows reflecting the setting, sun-like eyes devoid of emotion. Richard Blackwood observed the meticulously maintained gardens through his office window, an untouched glass of whiskey on the mahogany desk. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock, a family heirloom, marking time as if counting the absences that inhabited the place. Upstairs, the twins, Matthew and Gabe, remained in their adapted rooms, surrounded by modern equipment and all the technology money could buy. At 16, their brilliant minds were trapped in bodies that refused to obey. Cerebral palsy kept them in special wheelchairs, unable to verbalize their thoughts, but their eyes. How their eyes told stories that words could never express. "Mr. Blackwood?" Carmen's voice, the housekeeper, echoed down the corridor. "The new nurse has just resigned." Richard closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of frustration. She was the fifth in less than 3 months. They all arrived with impressive promises and diplomas, but left quickly, unable to handle the intensity of the work and the melancholic atmosphere that permeated the mansion. "Contact the agency again," he replied, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who already knew the endless cycle of hiring and firing. "Sir," Carmen hesitated, her hands twisting her impeccably white apron. "Maybe this time we could try something different. I have a niece. She doesn't have specific training, but she has experience with special children and—" "No." The answer was dry, cutting. "My sons need qualified professionals." But as he uttered those words, something within him questioned. What did his sons really need? Qualifications and diplomas had brought no progress. The boys remained isolated in their private world, responding less and less to stimuli. In the living room, Hannah, his sister-in-law, leafed through a decoration magazine with studied disinterest. She was the only connection that remained to Caroline, his deceased wife, and made a point of reminding him at every opportunity. Her constant presence in the mansion was both a blessing and a curse, a living reminder of what had been lost. "I heard about the nurse," she commented without raising her eyes from the magazine. "Perhaps it's time to consider that specialized clinic I mentioned." Richard felt his jaw tighten. The suggestion to institutionalize the twins was recurring, always presented with an artificially sweet concern that barely disguised other intentions. "My sons will stay at home, Hannah. This matter is closed." That night, after making sure the boys were settled, Richard allowed himself a moment of vulnerability in his office. The photographs on the wall seemed to watch him, Caroline radiant in her wedding dress, the first moments, with the twins still in the maternity ward, frozen moments of happiness that seemed to belong to another life. It was then that Carmen knocked on the door again, this time with a folder in hand. "Sir, before dismissing my suggestion, just look at this resume. She may not have impressive diplomas, but she has something the others didn't have." "And what would that be?" Richard asked, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "True love. For what she does. And sometimes, sir, that's what we need more than any diploma." Richard took the folder, more to end the conversation than out of real interest. But upon opening it, his eyes were captured by the simple photograph attached to the resume. The face of Leah Sanders, 32, looked at the camera with a serenity that seemed displaced in today's world. Her eyes conveyed a quiet strength, a determination, that went beyond the words printed on the paper. That night would mark the beginning of a transformation that no one could predict. The gears of destiny began to move, bringing to light truths long buried beneath layers of silence and social conventions. Leah Sanders adjusted the strap of her worn bag as she crossed the imposing gates of the Blackwood mansion. Her heart beat rapidly, not because of the grandeur of the place, but because of the responsibility she might assume. After years working in a community daycare, especially with children who needed special care, she knew this could be the opportunity to change, not only her life but the lives of others. The impeccable garden contrasted with her simple sandals, and for a moment she hesitated. Carmen's words echoed in her mind. Be yourself, Leah, that's what makes the difference. The housekeeper had been her salvation, offering her this chance when everything seemed lost. You must be Leah. Richard Blackwood's grave and formal voice surprised her. He observed her from the top of the staircase, his rigid posture revealing years of unquestioned authority. Yes, Mr. Blackwood, she responded, maintaining a firm gaze despite her nervousness. I appreciate the opportunity to— Follow me, he interrupted, turning on his heels. I want you to meet my sons before any decision. As they climbed the stairs, Leah could feel the gazes of passing staff, some curious, others skeptical. In the living room, an elegant woman observed them with barely disguised disapproval. Hannah, my sister-in-law, Richard briefly introduced. She assists in caring for the boys. Hannah merely nodded, her eyes studying Leah with a calculating interest that sent chills down her spine. There was something predatory in that gaze, a veiled hostility that Leah couldn't understand. Upon entering the twins' room, Leah felt her heart tighten. The two teenagers were in their wheelchairs, facing the window. Matthew, identified by a blue bracelet, had his fingers interlaced in his lap. Gabe, with his green bracelet, kept his head slightly tilted to the side. Instead of addressing Richard first or trying to impress him with technical knowledge, Leah did something that surprised everyone. She knelt between the boys' chairs, placing herself at their eye level. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Gabe, she said softly, her voice carrying a natural tenderness. May I stay with you for a little while? It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. For the first time, someone was addressing them directly, not as patients or problems to be solved, but as people. The silence that followed was different from the others. It wasn't laden with expectations or judgments, but with a connection that was beginning to form. Matthew moved his fingers slightly, a movement almost imperceptible to anyone not paying attention. Gabe, in turn, turned his face a few millimeters toward Leah's voice. They responded, murmured Hannah, her voice betraying surprise. And something more, concern. Leah continued, ignoring the adults around her. She began to tell about the garden she had seen outside, describing the colors and shapes with a vividness that made the words come alive. Her gestures were gentle, natural, as if she were conversing with old friends. It was then that something extraordinary happened. Gabe, who rarely showed any reaction to strangers, moved his right hand in a shy gesture, 3 fingers closing and opening slowly. Leah's heart stopped for an instant. That gesture, it was impossible. It was the same one she used to use with her son years ago, their little private code to say, I like you. But how? Why? This is unusual, Richard commented, his voice betraying a mixture of hope and disbelief. They don't normally react this way to new people. Leah quickly composed herself, although her mind was in turmoil. Each person has their own way of communicating, she replied, keeping her voice calm. Sometimes we just need to be truly present, to notice the signs. At that moment, something changed in the atmosphere of the mansion. It was as if a fresh breeze had crossed the somber corridors, bringing with it the promise of change. Richard observed the scene with renewed interest, while Hannah silently withdrew from the room, her heels echoing down the corridor like a harbinger of storm. The days at the Blackwood mansion began to take on a new routine with Leah's presence. She always arrived before sunrise, bringing with her an energy that seemed to illuminate the somber corridors. Her mornings were dedicated to Matthew, while the afternoons belonged to Gabe, a division she established to give individual attention to each of the twins. During one of these mornings, while helping Matthew with his physical therapy exercises, Leah noticed something peculiar. A small crescent-shaped scar at the base of the young man's neck, identical to the one her lost son had. Her heart raced, but she maintained her composure, continuing the gentle movements with the adolescent's legs. "Are you okay?" asked Carmen, noticing her sudden paleness. "Yes, just a little tired," Leah lied, trying to push away the memories that Mark had brought to the surface. Memories of a public maternity ward 16 years ago, when she woke up alone in a cold room. being informed that her baby had not survived complications from the birth. On the other side of the mansion, Hannah watched the interaction through the security camera installed in the boys' room. Her fingers drummed nervously on her laptop table while she tirelessly researched Leah Sanders' past. Something about that woman deeply bothered her, like a song out of tune in a perfect symphony. "You're obsessed," commented Richard, surprising her in her improvised office. "I'm protecting our family," retorted Hannah, quickly closing the computer screen. "Don't you find it strange? The boys have never responded like this to anyone before, and that woman, there's something about her. That doesn't convince me." Richard sighed, running his hands through his graying hair. "The boys are progressing, Hannah. For the first time in years, I see hope in their eyes." "And that doesn't scare you?" Hannah stood up, her eyes shining with a feverish intensity. "Caroline trusted me to protect the boys. I promised her, Richard. I promised that nothing bad would happen to them." The mention of Caroline's name made Richard stiffen. His wife, so young and full of life, dreamed of seeing her sons grow up. Now all that remained of her were photographs on the walls and memories that faded with the passing years. Meanwhile, in the twins' room, Leah was discovering small hidden treasures. An old toy car, identical to the one she kept in a box at home, a present she had bought for her son before he was even born. The coincidence was too disturbing to be ignored. Gabe, always more introspective than his brother, began to demonstrate a special connection with Leah. His eyes followed her around the room, and his fingers repeated more frequently that gesture, opening and closing 3 times. That intrigued her so much. "Did you also use that gesture with your son?" asked Carmen one day, catching Leah by surprise. How do you know about my son?" The housekeeper smiled gently. "You murmur to him while you sleep, during your naps at lunch break. You talk about promises and reunions." Leah felt tears forming, but held them back. It wasn't the time to give in to emotions. The boys needed her strong, present, focused on their progress. In her room at night, Hannah rummaged through old boxes of documents, yellowed newspaper clippings, hospital records, everything related to that night 16 years ago. Her fingers trembled as she touched each paper, as if they could burn her. One envelope in particular caught her attention. It contained photographs from the day the twins were born. "What are you looking for?" Richard's voice startled her. "Nothing," she quickly replied, hiding the documents. "Just memories." But Richard was no longer the same man absorbed in his pain. Leah's presence had awakened something in him, a desire for truth, perhaps. He approached his sister-in-law and, with a quick movement, took one of the photographs she was trying to hide. The image showed Caroline in the delivery room, surrounded by doctors. But there was something strange about that photo, something he had never noticed before. In the corner of the frame, partially cropped, was an incubator with a number, 3. "Why are there 3 incubators in the photo, Hannah?" His voice came out, as a tense whisper. Matthew and Gabe were only 2. Hannah's face lost all color. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. At that moment, the past she had worked so hard to keep buried began to emerge, like a submerged body that finally comes to the surface. The twins' progress under Leah's care was remarkable. Matthew began to sketch smiles, small, almost imperceptible, but real. Gabe developed his own system of communication through blinks, 1 for yes, 2 for no. The mansion, previously immersed in a heavy atmosphere of resignation, began to breathe hope. Richard spent more and more time observing Leah's interaction with his sons. There was something familiar in the way she touched the boy's hair, as if her hands held memories of similar gestures. In one of these moments, he caught her humming an old lullaby, the same one Caroline used to sing during pregnancy. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked, his voice betraying a contained emotion. Leah froze for an instant, her hands stopping in the middle of a movement. "My mother used to sing it to me," she replied after a pause. "It's an old song, passed down from generation to generation in my family." But there was something more in her eyes, a shadow of pain that Richard recognized. It was the same look he saw in the mirror every morning, the look of someone who carried losses too deep to be put into words. Meanwhile, Hannah intensified her investigation into Leah's past. On her computer, pages and pages of hospital records, old reports and official documents painted a disturbing picture. 16 years ago, in the same hospital where Caroline gave birth, there was a case of a missing baby, the son of a young single mother who was given as did not survive. "You won't believe what I found," Hannah whispered on the phone, speaking to someone whose identity she kept secret. "That woman, she might be..." The call was interrupted by Carmen's abrupt entry into the office. The housekeeper carried in her hands an old box found during the cleaning of the attic. "Mrs. Hannah, I found something you might want to see." Inside the box, a diary. Caroline's delicate handwriting filled page after page with her most intimate thoughts during pregnancy. The last notes hastily made revealed her growing anxiety. "Something is wrong," one entry said. "The doctors whisper in the corridors. 3 heartbeats, 3, but they only talk about twins." Hannah closed the diary forcefully, her face a mask of barely contained panic. "This means nothing," she declared, but her voice trembled. Caroline was confused, under the effect of medication. In the boys' room, Leah was assisting Gabe with his exercises when something extraordinary happened. The teenager, concentrated in a visible effort, moved his lips differently. It wasn't just a reflex movement. There was intention there. "Leah," he whispered, so low that it could have been imagination. She felt her heart stop. In 16 years, according to medical records, Gabe had never uttered a single word. Matthew, on the other side of the room, began to agitate in his chair, his fingers frantically repeating the gesture that so intrigued Leah, opening and closing 3 times. Richard, who was watching the scene from the door, felt his legs weaken. It was as if a veil was beginning to lift, revealing truths long buried beneath layers of well-constructed lies. That night, while the mansion slept, Leah remained awake in her small room in the back of the property. On her bed, she spread out her own memories: a yellowed maternity bracelet, a positive pregnancy test kept as a relic, and a blurry photograph of an ultrasound where 3 small, pulsating dots could be seen. Her fingers trembled as she touched each object, as if they could turn to dust at any moment. In her mind, unanswered questions danced in a torturous whirlwind. Why did the twins respond to the same gestures she had created for her lost son? Why had Gabe, who had never spoken before, managed to pronounce her name? A noise in the corridor startled her. Through the door crack, she saw Hannah moving furtively toward the library, carrying a bulky folder. Her instincts screamed that something important was about to happen, something that could forever change the fate of everyone in that house. In the mansion's library, Hannah was frantically rummaging through an old leather folder. Yellow documents escaped between her trembling fingers, spreading over the mahogany table. Her broken breathing was the only sound that broke the silence of the early morning. "Looking for something specific?" Leah's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. Hannah spun abruptly, papers flying around her. What are you doing here?" "The same as you, I imagine, looking for answers." Leah advanced a few steps, her eyes fixed on the scattered documents. Among them, she recognized a familiar header, St. Clair Hospital, the same where her son supposedly had not survived. "You have no idea what you're doing," Hannah hissed, trying to hastily collect the papers. "There are things that need to remain buried." "Like a third baby?" Leah asked, her voice carrying a calmness she didn't feel. "Like altered hospital records." Hannah's face lost all color. "What are you talking about?" "Caroline's diary. I found it before you did, Hannah. I read about the 3 heartbeats. I read about the whispers in the hospital corridors. And now, I see you in the middle of the night, destroying evidence." A noise at the door made both women turn. Richard was standing there, his face a mask of shock and growing comprehension. In his hands, he held Caroline's diary. "You knew?" His voice was just a hoarse whisper. "All this time, Hannah, you knew." Hannah retreated until she backed against the bookshelf like a cornered animal. "I did what needed to be done. Caroline was weak, The babies were premature. The hospital, there were complications, pending lawsuits. They needed a solution. A solution? Leah advanced, her hands trembling. Is that what you call it? Stealing a baby from its mother? Falsifying death records? Richard staggered as if he had taken a physical blow. His eyes ran from Hannah to Leah, connecting dots that had been in front of him all these years. The DNA test, he murmured. That's why you always prevented us from testing the boys. It wasn't because of the emotional costs, as you said. It was because she knew I might show up one day, Leah completed, silent tears running down her face. Because somewhere in some record the truth still existed. Hannah collapsed in a nearby armchair, her face buried in her hands. You don't understand. The hospital was on the verge of a scandal. Other babies, other cases. Caroline couldn't. No, she was so happy with the twins. And when she left us, I swore I would protect her children. They are my children too, Leah declared, her voice gaining strength. That gesture Gabe makes, opening and closing his fingers 3 times. I taught it to my baby when he was still in my womb. I sang to him every night, the same song Caroline sang. Because they were triplets, weren't they, Hannah? And you helped. Separate them? Richard crossed the library in long strides, picking up the phone. I'm calling my lawyer now, and the police. No! Hannah jumped. Pia, you can't. This would destroy everything. Caroline's memory, the family's reputation. The truth has already destroyed everything, Richard responded, his voice carrying an old pain and a new determination. But perhaps, just perhaps, it can also rebuild. Upstairs, as if sensing the storm unfolding in the library, Matthew and Gabe were awake in their rooms. Their fingers moved in perfect synchrony, opening and closing 3 times. A code of love that crossed 16 years of separation, connecting a mother to the sons she thought she had lost. Leah ran up the stairs, her heart beating to the same rhythm as her steps. Upon opening the door to the boys' room, she found them, both awake, their eyes shining with an understanding that transcended words. She knelt between their chairs as she had done on the first day, but this time let tears flow freely. My boys, she whispered, touching their faces with trembling hands. My sons. Morning came to the Blackwood mansion, bringing with it an atmosphere of transformation. Richard's office was taken over by lawyers and private investigators, each poring over piles of documents that Hannah had tried to destroy the night before. Leah remained by the boys' side, as if fearing they might disappear, again if she left them for even a second. Matthew and Gabe responded to her presence in subtle but unmistakable ways. A head movement here, a slight smile there, their fingers repeating that special gesture that now carried even more meaning. The documents are conclusive, announced Dr. Taylor, the family lawyer, removing his glasses with a heavy sigh. The scheme at the hospital was bigger than we imagined. Hannah didn't act alone. Richard, seated in his leather armchair, seemed to have aged a decade in a single night. Who else was involved? Dr. Morris, the obstetrician who performed the delivery, and some hospital administrators. Apparently this wasn't an isolated case. There were other babies, other families. Leah, who had just entered the office, felt her legs weaken. Richard rose quickly to support her, guiding her to a nearby chair. The gesture of care didn't go unnoticed. It was the first time he had touched her. How are we going to tell the boys? She asked, her voice choked. They've already suffered so much. They already know, Richard replied softly. Somehow they've always known. That's why they responded to you from the first moment. Blood, love, finds its ways. Upstairs, Carmen supervised the removal of Hannah's belongings from the room she occupied. Richard's sister-in-law had been taken to give a statement, her expression a mixture of defeat and relief when the patrol cars arrived. The boys need their physical therapy sessions, Carmen gently reminded, entering the office. And Dr. Paul has arrived for the speech therapy evaluation. The routine began to establish itself, even amid the chaos of the revelation. Leah and Richard agreed that stability was fundamental for Matthew and Gabe. The therapy sessions would continue, the schedules would be maintained, but now with a new energy, a new purpose. "They are stronger than we thought," commented Dr. Paul after his assessment. "The recent progress is remarkable. The emotional connection, it's as if something has unlocked inside them." In the afternoon, as the sun began to set, Leah found Richard in the garden, looking at the fountain where Caroline used to sit to read. She approached hesitantly, respecting the moment of reflection. "She would have been happy," he said without turning around. "Caroline always said there was more love in her heart than just for 2 babies. Now I know why." "Richard," Leah began, carefully choosing her words. "I don't want to take anyone's place. The boys have a history with you, a life built here." "And they have you," he interrupted, finally turning to face her. "They have your love, which crossed 16 years of separation and found its way back. It's not about replacing Leah, it's about adding." In the boys' room, the late afternoon, light painted golden shadows on the walls. Leah sat between the 2 wheelchairs, as she had done so many times in the past months, but now with the certainty that she was exactly where she should be. "You know what?" she began, her soft voice filling the environment. "When I was pregnant, I dreamed of 3 little stars in the sky, always 3. And even when they told me I had lost my baby, I continued to see those 3 stars every night. Now I know why." Matthew moved his hand, lightly touching Leah's arm. Gabe, at his own pace, managed to sketch a sound that resembled a laugh. It was as if the universe conspired to unite again what should never have been separated. That night, for the first time in 16 years, the Blackwood mansion was not just a house of luxury and silences. It was a home in reconstruction where love found new ways to flourish and where 3 stars finally shone, together again in the same sky. The days following the revelations brought with them a wave of changes to the Blackwood mansion. The old medical wing, once cold and impersonal, was completely remodeled under Leah's supervision. The walls gained vibrant colors, and the equipment was reorganized to create a more welcoming environment. "We need more light," Leah insisted, while supervising the installation of large panoramic windows. "The boys need to feel the sun, see the garden, be part of the world outside." Richard observed the transformations with a mixture of admiration and guilt. Each change seemed to highlight the years he kept his sons isolated, protected in a bubble that imprisoned more than it preserved. "Don't torture yourself," Leah said softly, noticing his expression. "You did what you believed was best at the time. Now it's time to look forward." The arrival of a new medical team brought encouraging perspectives. Dr. Melissa, a specialist in neuroplasticity, was particularly intrigued by the twins' progress. "It's fascinating," she commented during a meeting with Leah and Richard. "The emotional connection they've established is literally opening new neural pathways. The brain has an incredible capacity for adaptation when it finds the right stimuli." Gabe, especially, showed surprising advances in communication. After managing to pronounce Leah's name, other words began to emerge. Small, hesitant, but loaded with meaning. Water. Yes. Dad. Each new word was celebrated as a precious victory. Matthew, in turn, discovered an unexpected passion for music. Leah had brought a small adapted keyboard, and his hands, once restless, found purpose in the keys. Loose. Notes began to form simple melodies, and his eyes shone with a new joy when he managed to reproduce a correct sequence. "He was always the most musical," Richard commented one day, watching his son play. "Caroline played piano during pregnancy. She said she felt the babies move more when there was music." Leah smiled, sitting next to Matthew. "I also sang a lot when I was pregnant, especially one specific song." As if responding to a cue, Matthew began to play the first notes of that same lullaby, the melody that connected past and present, mother and sons across time and distance. The news about the hospital scheme began to gain larger proportions. Other families emerged. Other stories of separated babies came to light. Dr. Taylor coordinated a task force to identify and gather the cases. "It's as if we've opened Pandora's box," he explained during a tense meeting. "But this time, what escapes is not evils, but truths that needed to come to light. Carmen, who had become an even closer ally, began to organize weekly meetings in the mansion's garden. Other families affected by the hospital scheme were invited to share their stories, create support networks, rebuild lost pieces of their lives. "It's important for the boys to see that they're not alone on this journey," she explained to Leah. "That there are other stories, other families seeking healing and reconciliation." One afternoon, while supervising a physical therapy session, Leah found a photo album forgotten in one of the drawers in the boys' room. The images showed Caroline at different moments of pregnancy, her radiant smile, her hands always caressing, the belly that housed 3 lives. "She would be a wonderful mother," Richard said softly, finding Leah absorbed in the photographs. "And now I know that you are too." "We can be a different family," Leah responded, her eyes welling up. "One that honors the past while building a new future." In the garden, Matthew and Gabe participated in an outdoor therapy session, their faces turned toward the sun, their hands performing the exercises with renewed determination. The special gesture, opening and closing the fingers 3 times, was now shared by everyone in the house, a silent symbol of love and belonging. The Blackwood mansion, once a monument to pain and isolation, pulsed with a new energy. The laughter of the therapists mingled with the sound of Matthew's keyboard, with Gabe's hesitant but determined words, with Leah and Richard's hurried steps through the corridors, coordinating care and planning for the future. It was as if the physical space itself responded to the changes, opening up to light, to love, to the possibilities that tomorrow held. The truth, though painful in its unveiling, had brought with it the chance for a new beginning, not just for one family, but for all the lives touched by that extraordinary story of separation and reunion. Autumn tinged the mansion's garden with golden and red hues, marking the passage of time since the Great Revelations. Leah had moved to a small apartment annexed to the main house, a solution that allowed her to stay close to her sons while preserving the independence necessary for the new family dynamic. Mornings now began with a routine, established with care and dedication. Matthew and Gabe were awakened with soft music, a mixture of the melodies that Matthew was beginning to create on the keyboard and the old lullabies that carried so much meaning. "It's amazing how they respond to music," observed Dr. Melissa during an evaluation session, "especially when they play together, Matthew on the keyboard and Gabe keeping the rhythm with his hands. It's as if the music unlocks something inside them." Richard, who was gradually learning to lower his own emotional barriers, began to participate more actively in the therapies. His mornings in the office were reduced to be able to accompany the physical therapy sessions, and his nights were dedicated to learning new ways of communicating with his sons. "I never thought I could feel so complete," he confessed to Leah during one of the dinners they now regularly shared. "It's as if all these years I was living only half a life, without knowing." Hannah's presence still hung over the mansion, but no longer as a threatening shadow. The investigations had revealed that her actions, although unforgivable, were born from a place of deep and unresolved pain. She had lost a child years before Caroline became pregnant, a loss she never managed to process adequately. "I'm not defending what she did," Leah explained to the boys during one of their nightly conversations, "but we can choose not to carry anger in our hearts. That would only hurt us more." Gabe, who now could form short but complete sentences, surprised everyone with his response, "Family, new, better." The twins' progress continued to surprise the medical team. Matthew developed his own method of composition, using colors and symbols to represent musical notes. His melodies, though simple, carried an emotionality that touched everyone who heard them. One afternoon, during one of the garden meetings with other families affected by the hospital scheme, an elderly lady approached Leah. She had been a nurse at St. Clair at the time of the births. "I always knew something was wrong," she confessed, her hands trembling slightly. "But at that time, fear was greater than courage. I carried this weight for all these years." Leah held the lady's hands between her own. "The important thing is that now the truth has come to light, and with it, the chance for healing for so many families." Dr. Taylor continued his tireless work of identifying and reuniting other separated families, Each new case discovered brought with it a mixture of pain for the time lost and hope for the possibility of reconnection. "You are an example," he said during a meeting with Leah and Richard. "You showed that it's possible to rebuild, reconnect, even after so much time." The group therapy sessions became a highlight of the week at the mansion. Families shared their stories, their struggles, and their victories. Matthew and Gabe, once so isolated in their private world, now interacted with other children and adolescents who faced similar challenges. Carmen, observing all these changes, couldn't contain her joy. "It's as if the house has finally found its soul," she commented, while helping Leah organize a small surprise birthday party for the boys. The celebration would be simple, but meaningful, the first that would gather the entire new family configuration. Leah had prepared a special album, blending old photographs of pregnant Caroline with recent images of the boys, creating a visual bridge between past and present. "Look," she showed Richard, pointing to one particular photo, "the same smile. All three have her smile." Richard ran his fingers gently over the image, his eyes welling up. "And they have your strength, Leah. The same determination, the same capacity to love beyond any obstacle." The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden, Matthew played a new melody on his keyboard, while Gabe accompanied with his newly discovered words. Leah and Richard observed the scene side by side, their hearts full of a deep gratitude for the miracle of reunions, second chances, of love that transcends time and distance. Dr. Morris, the former obstetrician at St. Clair Hospital, sat uncomfortably in the library of the Blackwood Mansion. His restless eyes swept the luxurious environment, deliberately avoiding the gazes of Leah and Richard, who awaited his explanations. "I came because I need to clear my conscience," he began, his trembling voice revealing the weight of years of secrecy. "What happened that night? It wasn't an isolated case." Leah unconsciously squeezed Richard's hand, seeking strength to hear what was to come. The doctor continued, his words coming out like a long-held confession. "Hannah wasn't the mastermind of the scheme. She just took advantage of a system that already existed. The hospital. There was a network of illegal adoptions that had been operating for years. Rich families who couldn't have children, single mothers in vulnerable situations." Richard abruptly rose, his hands clenched into fists. "And Caroline? Did she know?" "No," the doctor quickly replied. "Your wife was under the effect of strong medication during delivery. When she began to talk about hearing 3 heartbeats, Hannah saw an opportunity. The hospital was about to face an investigation and she offered protection in exchange for a favor." Leah covered her face with her hands, silent tears running down her cheeks. "I begged to see my baby. They told me he hadn't survived." "It was a protocol," Dr. Morris explained, his voice choked. "We would say the baby hadn't survived. The mothers, young and frightened, rarely questioned, and when they did question, they were intimidated," Leah completed, remembering the fear she had felt at the time. Upstairs, oblivious to the tension unfolding in the library, Matthew and Gabe participated in their music therapy session. The therapist had noticed an interesting pattern. When they played together, their abilities seemed to complement each other perfectly. "It's as if they always knew they were 3, she commented to Carmen, who was observing the session. "See how they leave a natural space in the melody, as if they were waiting for someone to fill it." The housekeeper smiled, remembering how Leah used to hum the same melody that Matthew now played. "Some connections are too strong to be broken," she murmured. Back in the library, Dr. Morris removed a yellowed envelope from his briefcase. "This belonged to Caroline. She wrote during pregnancy, when she began to suspect there were 3 babies. She asked me to keep it in case something happened to her." Richard took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter addressed to his children. "My beloved ones, if you are reading this, it means my suspicions were right. I feel 3 hearts beating within me, 3 different souls that I already love more than my own life. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that each of you was wanted and loved from the first moment. If something happens to me, I ask that you remain united. A mother's love transcends even physical absence. find each other, protect each other, love each other. With all my love, Caroline. Leah stood up, walking to the window. In the garden, she could see the place where the boys usually had their therapy sessions. She knew, she whispered. Somehow she always knew. Why reveal this now? Richard questioned the doctor, his voice loaded with contained emotion. Because other cases are coming to light, other families, other stories, and because. He hesitated, looking directly at Leah for the first time. Because there was a nurse, Maria Simmons, who was present at your delivery, Leah. She kept proofs, documents, and she's willing to testify. The sound of Matthew's piano cut through the silence that followed. The melody, once incomplete, now seemed to find its perfect harmony when Gabe added his voice in a soft murmur. The boys, Leah said suddenly, they need to know not about the conspiracy or the hospital, but about Caroline, about how she loved them, how she knew they were 3. Richard nodded, holding the letter to his chest. She gave us a precious gift with these words. The truth, even if painful, is always better than silence. Dr. Morris rose to leave, the weight of decades of secrecy visibly lighter on his shoulders. At the door, he turned one last time. There are more families, more stories to be discovered, but you are proof that love finds its way back. As the doctor departed, Leah and Richard remained in the library, the sound of the boys' piano filling the room with a melody that seemed, finally, complete. Caroline's words, written so long, echoed like a blessing over that family which, against all odds, had found each other again. News about the St. Clair Hospital scheme made headlines in major newspapers. Dr. Taylor now coordinated a task force dedicated to investigating all cases of suspicious adoptions over the past 2 decades. Each day, new families discovered truths, long buried beneath layers of lies and falsified documents. At the Blackwood mansion, Leah organized a special meeting in the garden. Families from across the country had been invited. Parents who discovered children they thought they'd lost, siblings separated at birth, mothers who finally found answers to questions that had tormented them for years. It's important for the boys to see that they're not alone in this story, she explained to Richard as they arranged tables under the century-old trees, that there are other families being reconnected, other love stories finding their way. Matthew and Gabe were especially excited that morning. With the help of their therapists, they had prepared a musical presentation. Matthew on the piano, Gabe keeping rhythm with a percussion instrument adapted to his motor capabilities. They chose the song that Caroline sang, Carmen commented, helping to arrange the flower displays, the same one that Leah sang when she was pregnant. As guests arrived, the garden came, alive with voices, laughter, and some tears, no longer of pain but of recognition and hope. Among them was Maria Simmons, the nurse who had kept the evidence that helped uncover the scheme. I never forgot your face, she said to Leah, holding her hands, nor your cries asking to see your baby. I carried that guilt for years, but now I can help other families find the truth. The boys' performance was the most emotional moment of the gathering. When the first notes of the old lullaby filled the air, a reverent silence fell over the garden. Gabe, surprising everyone, began to sing, his voice still hesitant but clear. 3 little stars in the sky, 3 little angels shining bright, 3 pieces of my being that love will find. Leah couldn't contain her tears. Richard, at her side, held her hand firmly, while with the other he clutched Caroline's letter in his pocket. In the audience, other mothers, other fathers, other children recognized themselves in that melody that spoke of separation and reunion. After the performance, while guests shared their stories in small groups, an elderly lady approached Leah timidly. She carried an old box of photographs. I worked in the maternity ward at that time, she explained, and I kept something you might want to see. Inside the box, among other memories yellowed by time, was a photograph that made Leah's heart stop. Herself, 16 years younger, pregnant, smiling at the camera during a prenatal consultation. At her side, partially visible, was Caroline. Both on the same day at the same hospital, their round bellies promising futures that seemed so different at the time. You arrived on the same day for prenatal care, the lady explained. Caroline commented on how beautiful it was to see another mother so young and happy. She didn't know. Neither of you knew. Richard observed the scene from afar, his heart overflowing with contradictory emotions. Pain for the suffering caused, gratitude for the reunion, love for the family that now recognized and reconstructed itself. At the end of the afternoon, when the last guests were leaving, Matthew called Leah and Richard to his piano. With a radiant smile, he began to play a new melody, one he had composed especially for that day. "Family," Gabe said, his voice stronger and clearer than ever. "Our family." Leah embraced her sons, feeling the love that overflowed in every small gesture, in every musical note, in every word conquered. Richard joined the embrace, completing the family circle that, although formed by unexpected paths, was stronger and truer than any social convention. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden of the Blackwood mansion, where once silence and melancholy reigned, now echoed the notes of a new song, a melody of hope, forgiveness, and unconditional love. News about the St. Clair Hospital scheme made headlines in major newspapers. Dr. Taylor now coordinated a task force dedicated to investigating all cases of suspicious adoptions over the past 2 decades. Each day, new families discovered truths long buried beneath layers of lies and falsified documents. At the Blackwood mansion, Leah organized a special meeting in the garden. Families from across the country had been invited. Parents who discovered children they thought they'd lost, siblings separated at birth, mothers who finally found answers to questions that had tormented them for years. "It's important for the boys to see that they're not alone in this story," she explained to Richard as they arranged tables under the century-old trees. "That there are other families being reconnected, other love stories finding their way." Matthew and Gabe were especially excited that morning. With the help of their therapists, they had prepared a musical presentation, Matthew on the piano, Gabe keeping rhythm with a percussion instrument adapted to his motor capabilities. They chose the song that Caroline sang, Carmen commented, helping to arrange the flower displays, the same one that Leah sang when she was pregnant. As guests arrived, the garden came alive with voices, laughter, and some tears, no longer of pain, but of recognition and hope. Among them was Maria Simmons, the nurse who had kept the evidence that helped uncover the scheme. "I never forgot your face," she said to Leah, holding her hands, "nor your cries asking to see your baby. I carried that guilt for years, but now I can help other families find the truth." The boys' performance was the most emotional moment of the gathering. When the first notes of the old lullaby filled the air, a reverent silence fell over the garden. Gabe, surprising everyone, began to sing, his voice still hesitant but clear. "3 little stars in the sky, 3 little angels shining bright, 3 pieces of my being that love will find." Leah couldn't contain her tears. Richard, at her side, held her hand firmly, while with the other he clutched Caroline's letter in his pocket. In the audience, other mothers, other fathers, other children recognized themselves in that melody that spoke of separation and reunion. After the performance, while guests shared their stories in small groups, an elderly lady approached Leah timidly. She carried an old box of photographs. "I worked in the maternity ward at that time," she explained, "and I kept something you might want to see." Inside the box, among other memories yellowed by time, was a photograph that made Leah's heart stop. Herself, 16 years younger, pregnant, smiling at the camera during a prenatal consultation. At her side, partially visible, was Caroline, both on the same day at the same hospital, their round bellies promising futures that seemed so different at the time. "You arrived on the same day for prenatal care," the lady explained. Caroline commented on how beautiful it was to see another mother so young and happy. She didn't know. Neither of you knew. Richard observed the scene from afar, his heart overflowing with contradictory emotions. Pain for the suffering caused, gratitude for the reunion, love for the family that now recognized and reconstructed itself. At the end of the afternoon, when the last guests were leaving, Matthew called Leah and Richard to his piano. With a radiant smile, he began to play a new melody, one he had composed especially for that day. "Family," Gabe said, his voice stronger and clearer than ever. "Our family." Leah embraced her sons, feeling the love that overflowed in every small gesture, in every musical note, in every word conquered. Richard joined the embrace, completing the family circle that, although formed by unexpected paths, was stronger and truer than any social convention. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden of the Blackwood mansion, where once silence and melancholy reigned, now echoed the notes of a new song, a melody of hope, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Maria Simmons arrived at the Blackwood mansion on a rainy autumn morning, carrying an old and worn folder. Her normally serene face was marked by an expression of urgency that did not go unnoticed by Leah. "I found something you need to see," the former nurse announced, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the folder on the library table. It was hidden in a dead file at the hospital, along with other documents that Hannah tried to destroy. Richard and Leah leaned over the table, while Maria spread a series of yellowed documents. Among them, one immediately caught their attention. A detailed record of Caroline's delivery, with handwritten notes in the margins. "Dr. Morris kept a parallel diary of all special cases," Maria explained, pointing to the notes. "He recorded information that couldn't appear in the official documents." Leah held her breath as she read one of the annotations. "Triplets. Special condition detected in 2. Special procedure authorized by HA. Separation necessary to avoid pending investigations. HA. Hannah Atwood," Richard murmured, his voice carrying a mixture of pain and contained anger. "She not only knew from the beginning, she orchestrated everything." While the adults absorbed this new information, upstairs, Matthew and Gabe participated in a special session with Dr. Melissa. The therapist had noticed an interesting pattern in Matthew's musical compositions, a structure always divided into 3 distinct parts that, when played together, formed a perfect harmony. "It's fascinating," she commented to Carmen, who was observing the session. "It's as if through music he were expressing a connection that always existed, even before they knew the truth." Gabe, using his tablet, typed a message that left everyone emotional. The music was always in all 3 of us. Mom Leah sang to us, Mom Caroline too, different voices, same love. Back in the library, Maria continued revealing surprising discoveries. Among the documents, there was a series of letters that Caroline had written during her pregnancy, letters that Hannah had intercepted and hidden. "Dear children," Leah read aloud, her hands trembling, "today I felt you move in a different way. Like a synchronized dance, 3 small beings connected by something beyond what I can explain. The doctors say there are only 2, but my mother's heart knows. There is more love here than they can see." Richard had to sit down, overwhelmed by emotion. She knew. All this time, at some level, she knew. Maria took another document, this one more recent. "There's more. I found records of other similar cases at the hospital. Hannah wasn't alone in this scheme. There was a whole network of professionals involved, all protecting each other. That's why she had so much power," Leah concluded, the pieces of the puzzle finally fitting together. She knew too, much about too many important people. In the garden, the rain had given a truce and the twins were taken for their outdoor physical therapy session. Matthew had brought his portable keyboard, and while doing his exercises, he gently fingered a new melody he had composed. "This one is special," he communicated through his gestures. "It's for our 2 mothers." Gabe, inspired by his brothers, music began to sing softly, his voice once hesitant, now firmer and clearer. 3 hearts, 2 loves, 1 family. Leah, who had joined them in the garden, felt her heart tighten with the spontaneous display of affection. Richard, at her side, held her hand firmly, both witnessing the daily miracle of seeing their sons flourish. Carmen approached the group, carrying an old box she had found in the attic. "Sir, ma'am, I think you should see this too," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. Inside the box was a photo album that no one had seen before. The images showed Caroline at different stages of pregnancy, but what caught attention were the notes she had made in the margins of each photo. "3 different movements," said one. "3 distinct personalities making themselves known," recorded another. And in the last photo, taken a few days before delivery, a particularly touching note: "No matter what happens, a mother's love always finds its way." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden of the Blackwood mansion, a unique family continued its journey of discoveries and reconnections. The revelations of that day were not only about the past, they were about how love in its multiple forms always finds ways to manifest and survive. Dr. Taylor organized a special meeting at the Blackwood mansion. The spacious hall, once used only for social events empty of meaning, now housed families from all over the country, all connected by the same web of secrets that was beginning to unveil. "Each story we discover," he explained to the attentive audience, "leads us to others. It's like a web of connections that was always there, waiting to be revealed." Among those present was an elderly lady who caught Leah's attention. Sitting discreetly in a corner of the hall, she observed everything with teary eyes. When their gazes crossed, Leah felt an inexplicable connection. "My name is Beatrice," the lady introduced herself later, her voice trembling slightly. "I was a midwife at St. Clair 20 years ago. And before you ask, yes, I was there on the day of your delivery, Leah, and Caroline's too." Leah's heart accelerated. Richard, who was nearby, approached to hear better. "At that time," Beatrice continued, "I didn't have the courage to speak up. The fear, the system was much bigger than any of us imagined. But now..." She opened her purse and removed a small, leather-bound diary. "I recorded everything, each special birth, each suspicious procedure. It was my way of keeping my conscience alive, even when I couldn't act." The pages of the diary revealed a disturbing pattern. Over 2 decades, dozens of babies had been separated from their biological families, always following a protocol similar to what had separated the triplets. In the garden, oblivious to the revelations unfolding in the hall, Matthew and Gabe participated in a special music therapy session. The therapist had brought a new instrument, an adapted harp that allowed Gabe, with his limited movements, to produce delicate sounds. "It's incredible," Carmen commented, watching the brothers play together. "The music seems to flow between them like a silent conversation." Maria, who had joined the group in the garden, smiled knowingly. "Did you know that Caroline played harp during pregnancy? She said it was the only instrument that made all 3. Babies move in synchrony." In the hall, Beatrice continued her account, now to a larger group of families that had formed around her. Her words painted a complex picture of how the scheme worked, how influential families were connected with available babies, how records were altered, how stories were fabricated. "The hardest part," she confessed, "was seeing the look in the mother's eyes when we told them their babies hadn't survived. That pain I carry with me to this day." Leah held the old midwife's hand. "You're here now. You're helping to fix what was broken." Richard, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Caroline used to say that there are no coincidences, only meetings that were destined to happen. Perhaps all this suffering has led us exactly where we needed to be." The afternoon advanced, and in the garden, Matthew began to play a new composition. It was different from anything he had created before, a melody that seemed to carry in its notes all the weight and all the beauty of that extraordinary story. Gabe, using his tablet, typed a message that was projected on the screen installed in the garden. "This music is about all of us, about how sometimes we need to get lost to truly find ourselves." The families gathered in the hall were attracted by the music, and gradually the garden filled with people, all connected by stories of loss, search, and reunion. Some cried silently, others smiled, recognizing in Matthew's notes their own journeys. Beatrice, observing the scene, took one last surprise from her purse, an old photograph of the hospital nursery. In it, 3 small babies slept side by side, connected by tubes and monitors. "It was the only photo I managed to take before they separated them," she explained. "I kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment." Leah took the photograph. With trembling hands, there they were, Her 3 sons together for the first and last time before fate separated them for 16 years. Matthew, Gabe, and the empty space in their lives that had finally been filled. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, casting golden shadows over the Blackwood garden. Matthew's music continued, now accompanied by Gabe's soft harp and the murmur of conversations, stories being shared, connections being made, hearts beginning to heal. Hannah Atwood observed the movement in the mansion's garden through the window of her apartment. After months of investigations and testimonies, she had been released to house arrest, but the weight of her actions kept her more imprisoned than any judicial sentence. "You have a visitor," announced her caretaker, bringing an unexpected surprise. Leah was standing at the door, her face a mask of serenity that concealed the interior storm. "Why did you come?" Hannah asked, her voice weak and trembling, so different from the authoritarian woman she used to be. "Because we need to close this cycle," Leah responded, sitting in the armchair across from Richard's sister-in-law. "Not for me, not for you, but for the boys." Hannah lowered her eyes to her wrinkled hands, which wouldn't stop trembling. "How are they?" "Flourishing," Leah responded with simplicity. "Matthew composed a new symphony. Gabe is speaking more and more. They ask about you, you know?" Tears began to stream down Hannah's aged face. "I don't deserve their forgiveness from any of you." "It's not about deserving," Leah explained gently. "It's about healing, about understanding. Maria told me about your son, Hannah, about how you lost him at the same hospital years before." Hannah sobbed, decades of repressed pain finally finding escape. "It was supposed to be a normal delivery, but something went wrong. They said he didn't survive. Later, years later, I discovered. It had been another case, another lie, but it was too late. And then you became part of the same system that destroyed your life," Leah completed, beginning to understand the cycle of pain that had connected all those lives. "When Caroline became pregnant, I swore I would protect her, that her children would never suffer. But when I discovered they were 3, that 2 of them had special needs, I panicked. I thought I was protecting everyone." In the mansion's garden, Matthew played his new composition, the notes floating through the afternoon air until they reached Hannah's apartment. She closed her eyes, recognizing the melody. It was the same one Caroline used to sing during pregnancy. "Do you want to know a secret?" Leah asked, her voice soft. "That song, I also sang it when I was pregnant, without knowing why, without understanding the connection, as if our souls knew something our minds didn't yet comprehend." Hannah opened her eyes, meeting Leah's gaze. "How can you be here? How can you look at me without hatred?" "Because I learned that hatred only generates more pain, and we've had enough pain in our lives." Leah stood up, approaching the window. "The boys want to see you, Hannah, not to confront or accuse, but to understand, to heal." "I don't know if I have that courage," Hannah whispered. "Courage comes when we decide to face our truth," Leah responded. "That's what I learned from my sons. Each small progress they make is an act of courage." In the garden, Gabe had joined his brother at the piano, his voice rising clear and strong. 3 hearts, 1 love, a whole family." Hannah rose with difficulty, approaching the window. Down below, she could see Richard joining his sons, his face illuminated by a smile she hadn't seen in a long time. "Maybe," she murmured, "maybe it's time to try to be brave too." Leah gently touched Hannah's shoulder. "Tomorrow is their birthday. We're going to have a small celebration in the garden. It will be the first time we can truly celebrate together as a family." "A family," Hannah repeated, the word carrying a new meaning. Caroline would be happy to see this. She always said true love finds its way. When Leah left the apartment that afternoon, something had changed. It wasn't forgiveness. Some wounds were too deep to be completely healed. It was understanding. It was the possibility of a new beginning. It was the chance to transform a story of separation into a journey of reconnection. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden, the music continued, now softer, more serene. It was a melody of healing, of hope, of love that transcends time, distance, and even the most painful choices. The morning of the twins' birthday dawned radiant. The garden of the Blackwood mansion had been transformed into a magical setting, with colorful ribbons dancing in the gentle breeze and tables decorated with fresh flowers. Leah supervised the final preparations while Richard helped the boys get ready. "Everything is perfect," Carmen assured, adjusting a flower arrangement. "Exactly as they deserve." The guests began to arrive. It wasn't a large party, but each person present carried a special meaning. Maria Simmons, the nurse who had kept the evidence that changed everything. Beatrice, the former midwife who finally found the courage to tell her story. Dr. Taylor, who had helped uncover the truth. And, to the surprise of many, Hannah. She arrived discreetly, supported by her caretaker, her face a mask of nervousness and expectation. Matthew was the first to notice her, and his reaction surprised everyone. He began to play a soft melody on the piano that had been installed in the garden, the same music that Caroline played when she was pregnant. Gabe, using his tablet, typed a message that was projected on a nearby screen. "Welcome, Aunt Hannah. We were waiting for you." Leah approached Hannah, offering silent support. Richard, after a moment of hesitation, joined them. It was a delicate moment, loaded with complex emotions and painful memories, but also with possibilities for healing. "I brought something," Hannah said softly, handing a package to Leah. "They're all the photographs I kept of them over the years. Every moment, every small achievement. Now they belong to you too." Leah opened the album with trembling hands. There was documented the life of her sons during the 16 years they were separated. First smiles, moments of progress, ordinary days that she could never share. "Thank you," she whispered, understanding that this gesture was more than a simple delivery of photographs. It was a form of acknowledgement, of repentance, of desire for reparation. The celebration flowed with surprising naturalness. Matthew presented his new composition, a complex piece he had created especially for the occasion. Gabe, overcoming his shyness, sang a few words to accompany his brother. Maria, observing the scene, commented to Beatrice, "Who would have thought that those 3 babies we saw born would be here today making music together?" "Love always finds its way," Beatrice replied, repeating the words that had become a mantra for that family. Richard stood to make a toast, his voice choked with emotion. "Today we celebrate not just a birthday, but a miracle. The miracle of love that survives distance, time, circumstances. Caroline is here with us in each of the boys' smiles, in each musical note, in each moment of shared joy." Leah added, "And we also celebrate new beginnings, the courage to face the truth, however painful it may be, the strength to rebuild, to forgive, to move forward." Hannah, who had remained silent, finally found her voice. "I ask for forgiveness, not just for what I did, but for the time I stole from all of you, each day, each moment that could have been different." Matthew interrupted her speech with a new melody, soft, gentle, full of hope. Gabe, through his tablet, expressed what everyone felt. "The past cannot be changed, but the future is in our hands, and we choose to build it together." The afternoon. Sun bathed the garden in a golden light, creating an almost magical moment. The curtains of the mansion swayed gently with the breeze, as if the house itself breathed relieved, finally free from the secrets it had harbored for so long. Leah observed her sons, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Richard, her side, held her hand firmly. Hannah, seated nearby, seemed lighter, as if the weight of decades of guilt finally began to dissipate. Matthew's music continued, now softer, more serene. It was a melody of healing, of hope, of love that transcends time, distance, and even the most painful choices. It was the music of a family that, against all odds, had found its way back home. Spring arrived, bringing with it a wave of transformations to the Blackwood mansion. The garden, once austere and formal, had been redesigned to become a therapeutic space where Matthew and Gabe could conduct their sessions outdoors. It was their idea, Leah explained to Maria, who admired the changes. They wanted a place that combined music and nature, where other families could also find peace. The twins' progress continued to surprise everyone. Matthew had begun to give small piano performances for other children with special needs, showing that music could be a path of expression for anyone. Gabe, in turn, developed his own form of art. Using a special program on his tablet, he created digital illustrations that complemented his brother's compositions. Together, they were creating a multimedia project that told their story in a unique and touching way. "It's fascinating," commented Dr. Melissa during an evaluation. "They've found a way to transform their experience into something that can help others. Art as an instrument of healing." Richard had transformed an entire wing of the mansion into a support center for families affected by the hospital scheme. Dr. Taylor coordinated a team of professionals who offered free legal and psychological support. "Each family we help," he explained during a meeting, "is a wound that begins to heal. And it all started with your courage to seek the truth." Hannah, who continued her process of redemption, had begun to work voluntarily at the center. Her experience from the other side of the story offered a unique perspective that helped other people understand the complexity of the situations. "I don't seek forgiveness," she said during a support group session. "I only seek the chance to do something positive with the time I have left." One afternoon, while Leah was organizing photographs for a new family album, she found an image that made her pause. It was from the day she met the twins when she knelt between their wheelchairs and asked permission to stay. "You already knew, didn't you?" Richard asked softly, finding her absorbed in the photograph. "Even without knowing, your heart recognized your sons." "Just as yours recognized that I belonged here," she replied, smiling. "Some connections are too strong to be explained." In the garden, Matthew and Gabe prepared for a special presentation. It was the official launch of their Three Hearts project, a combination of music, digital art, and poetry that told not only their story, but that of all the families who had been separated and reunited. The event gathered people from all over the country, other families who had discovered their own truths, health professionals who now fought for changes in the system, journalists who helped give voice to stories that needed to be told. When Matthew began to play, his hands dancing over the piano keys with a grace that defied his physical limitations, the entire garden seemed to hold its breath. Gabe, using his increasingly firm voice, sang the lyrics they had composed together. "Time does not erase true love, nor can distance break the bonds that destiny has woven, three hearts beating as one." Gabe's illustrations were projected onto a large screen, telling in colors and shapes the journey of separation and reunion. Leah, seated between Richard and Hannah, felt her heart overflow with pride and love. "Caroline would be so proud," Hannah whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she held a handkerchief. She always knew her children would be special. "They are more than special," Richard replied, his voice choked with emotion. "They are a miracle, our miracle." The presentation ended with a new composition, a piece that Matthew had created especially for the moment. It was a melody that began with loose notes, seemingly disconnected, that gradually united in a perfect harmony, like three lives that after so long separated finally found their way back to each other. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden of the Blackwood mansion, where once silence and melancholy reigned, now echoed the notes of a new story, a story of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. The success of Matthew and Gabe's Three Hearts project exceeded all expectations. The musical documentary that told their story had touched thousands of people, inspiring other families to seek their own buried truths. The Blackwood mansion, once a symbol of isolation and secrets, had transformed into a beacon of hope. "It's amazing how everything has changed," commented Carmen, while helping organize the big event that was approaching. The mansion was preparing to host the first national meeting of reunited families, an initiative born from the impact of the Twins project. Leah, supervising the preparations, found Matthew concentrated on his new composition. His musical abilities had flourished in ways no one could have predicted. With the aid of adaptive technology, he now managed to create complex arrangements that translated the deepest feelings into melody. "This one is special," he communicated through his device. "It's for all the mothers who never gave up searching. Gabe, working in his own adapted studio, created the digital animations that would accompany his brother's music. His illustrations, increasingly sophisticated, told stories without the need for words. "Each drawing is a memory," he explained, his voice now firmer and clearer. "Even those we didn't live are kept in our hearts." Richard observed his sons with a mixture of pride and admiration. "They've overcome all the limitations the world tried to impose," he said to Leah. "And not just the physical ones." Dr. Taylor had brought important news. The Blackwood case had inspired a complete reform in the adoption system and hospital protocols. New laws were being proposed to ensure that stories like theirs would never be repeated. "You've started a silent revolution," he said during a meeting. "A revolution of love and truth." Hannah, who continued her volunteer work at the support center, had found her own form of redemption. Her knowledge of the old system helped uncover other cases, bringing light to stories long buried in the shadows. "Each truth revealed," she reflected during a support group session, "is a chance for healing, not just for the families involved, but for all of us who carry the weight of secrets." Maria Simmons had become a maternal figure for many of the families seeking help at the center. Her experience as a nurse, combined with her natural compassion, made her a bridge between the painful past and a future of hope. "You know what moves me the most?" she commented to Leah during a quiet moment. "Seeing how love finds its ways, even through the most unlikely circumstances." The former midwife Beatrice, who had helped uncover so many cases, now coordinated a historical documentation project. Each story discovered, each family reunited, was carefully recorded for future generations. "So that we never forget," she explained, "not just the pain of separation, but mainly the beauty of reunions." On the eve of the big meeting, Matthew and Gabe prepared a special surprise. With the help of their team of therapists, they had created a presentation that combined music, art, and poetry in a unique way. The mansion's garden had been transformed into a natural amphitheater. Hundreds of lanterns softly illuminated the space, creating an almost magical atmosphere. The families began to arrive, each carrying their own story of loss and reunion. Leah, Richard, and Hannah sat together in the front row. Years of pain and secrets had transformed into a deep understanding of how love can transcend even the most serious mistakes. When Matthew began to play his new composition, the entire garden seemed to hold its breath. The notes flowed like a river of emotions, while Gabe's animations painted the night sky with colors and shapes that seemed to dance with the music. "It's more than a presentation," whispered Richard, holding Leah's hand. "It's a testimony to how true love always finds its way." The night advanced, and with it, a sensation that something greater than all of them was happening. It was as if each note, each image, each shared word was one more step toward the collective healing that everyone sought. The national meeting of reunited families transformed the Blackwood mansion into a space of celebration and healing. Hundreds of people gathered, each carrying their own story of separation and reunion, all connected by the invisible thread of love that resisted time and distance. Matthew and Gabe had become symbols of hope for many families. Their music and art not only told their story, but gave voice to all those who still sought their lost truths. "See," Gabe said, using his voice that now carried confidence and clarity, "each of us is part of a greater melody. Separated, we are loose notes. Together, we create a symphony." Leah observed her sons with a heart overflowing with love and gratitude. The path had been long and often painful, but each step had brought them exactly where they needed to be. Richard, who had learned to open his heart to new forms of love, shared with those present a precious discovery: Caroline's last diary, found during the renovation of the mansion. "My beloved children," he read, his voice choked with emotion. "As I write these words, I feel you moving inside me. 3 hearts beating in synchrony, 3 souls connected by a love that transcends any understanding. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm certain that the love I feel for you will find its way, regardless of the circumstances." Hannah, seated among the families she now helped reunite, felt tears freely running down her face. Her journey of redemption had become part of something greater than herself, a movement of healing and reconciliation that continued to grow. Dr. Taylor announced that the mansion's support center would be expanded, becoming a national foundation dedicated to reuniting separated families and promoting changes in the system. And it all began here, he said, gesturing to the garden where so many stories had intertwined. With a mother who never stopped searching, with brothers who never stopped feeling connected, with a father who learned to open his heart to new possibilities of love. Maria and Beatrice, who had become fundamental pillars of the project, shared with everyone a special patchwork quilt they had created. Each piece told the story of a reunited family, forming a mosaic of love and hope. When night began to fall, Matthew took his place at the piano one last time. The melody he began to play was different from all the previous ones, deeper, more complex, carrying in its notes the entire journey they had traveled. Gabe, using his tablet, projected onto the night sky an animation that transformed the stars into dancers of light. The images told not just their story, but that of all the families present, stories of loss, search, hope, and finally, reunion. Leah, hand in hand with Richard, felt they had reached a new beginning. The Blackwood mansion was no longer just a house. It was a beacon of hope, a living testimony that true love always finds its way. "You know," she said, addressing all those present, "our story began with 3 hearts separated by distance and time. But love had other plans. It guided us through darkness, kept us connected even when we didn't know we were looking for each other, and finally brought us back home." The last notes of Matthew's music floated in the night air, mingling with the stars shining in the sky. At that moment, all those present felt